Okay. We're recording. Hi, Matthew.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Okay, so why don't you tell me a little bit about what your goals for like this session specifically are with your speech? Like, what do you want to improve?
So something. I obviously just want to see someone get some eyes on and get some notes. But the main thing I want to focus on that I'm doing differently in this presentation, or trying to, that I've done from other ones. I like to speak like very physically with my hands and stuff, and I really want to try to incorporate like physicality into my presentation. But I know what I've gotten in pretty much all of my presentations is that I tend to like walk and move around a lot, and that's good, but I don't do it with a purpose. And so I'm trying to find a way to incorporate like physicality but with purpose.
Physicality with purpose. Okay.
Because I think I'm good at being engaging like physically, but like I just gotta make it work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're a really energetic person, you know, so which works to your benefit. But I'll look out for some of the physicality stuff here. I'm gonna go close the door.
Sweet.
So we don't have as much noise, and so people don't come and take the classroom from us. Okay. And I'll be sitting here, and I'll let you run through it, and then we'll go back and look at some things you did well, some things you can work on. Cool?
Sweet.
All right, whenever you want to start.
So today I'm going to talk to you guys about my journey on trying to get a suit. It all started when I was about 14. I was working as a farmhand for $50 a day for 8-hour shifts. I was absolutely getting swindled, but I really didn't know it. So basically, after a couple of months of working as a farmhand, I decided that I wanted to buy my first suit. Because, you know, I was pretty poor growing up, and in my mind, having a suit is absolutely the most bougie thing you could have, and I wanted to be bougie. So I went with my mom. She had just gotten off work. She was a waitress, and we got in the car and drove to a men's warehouse, which to me was the classiest place you could possibly be. And we went in, and I am covered in hay and mud from being a farmhand, and my mom is in a Perkins uniform. And pretty immediately, the man working there saw we were kind of out of place, and he decided to note that. He made a joke about it. We laughed it off. And then he made the comment after we said that we wanted to buy a suit that everything here was probably outside of our price range, and that I should maybe look into a Target down the street that also had suits. And so I did what any reasonable 14-year-old boy would do, and I tried to punch the bitch. I tried as hard as I could, but mom grabbed me by the shirt collar and drugged me outside. It was very embarrassing for me. But at that point in time, I was yelling, I was screaming, I was telling my mom that I wanted to go back in and beat the hell out of that dude. But as not only was I a lanky 14-year-old who probably could not have taken him, my mom also said that that is not the kind of people we were. And that the issue was that people like him would never understand people like us. And that stuck with me more than just about anything anyone has ever said to me. I started really resenting everyone around me. At school, anyone who looked like they had even the slightest amount of money, I hated them. I walked around with holes in my clothes, everything was secondhand or stolen, and pretty much anything I owned had some amount of patchwork from places that my mom had to sew it up. I lived in a trailer, and so anyone who I knew had a house, I saw them as having more than me, and I thought that they were just an asshole for it. Everyone around me, I really started to kind of hate, to the point where it wasn't even just poor people anymore. I grew up with a different upbringing. My relationship with my father specifically was really toxic, and so people who had parents I started to hate. As I got older and realized I was gay, I started to hate straight people. Anyone in my life I really hated. And you'd think I'd be upset about that, but I actually kind of liked it. I felt very independent. I felt strong. I didn't need anybody, and I genuinely didn't. I was doing fine. You know, I had no friends. I was still able to work a job. You know, I was paying my parents' bills. I was doing great in my mind. But then, you know, you get older and that isolation starts to feel less like independence and more like loneliness. So that's when I got to college. And, you know, I thought maybe I would be able to, you know, be on an even playing field with everyone. Because, you know, we all made it here. And that wasn't the case at actually. Instead, what happened was I looked around at all these people who had parents paying for them to be here, people who got here on academic scholarships, people who didn't have to work to pay their way through college, and I hated them for it. I went even deeper and deeper into this area of isolation. And so I did something very gross. I started stealing from people, which, was fair. I would go on an app called Grindr, and it was basically a gay hookup app. And where else can you find money other than gay people in Muncie, Indiana? So I started getting on the app, and I would go on dates with people, and then we would go back to their home for adult reasons, and as they were asleep, I would take watches, I would take wallets, credit cards, anything I could. I was great at it, really. I usually managed to find guys who were much older than me, so I wouldn't run into them on campus, and so they'd have a little bit more money. And I would then disappear. I gave them a fake name so they could never track me down. I would block them on the app immediately after. They had no way to get my phone number. I was a ghost. I was really good at it, honestly. But then something happened where I was on the app, and I saw a young man in a really nice suit. He was about my age, and I was pissed. I was so angry because this dude who, again, my age, he's in this really nice suit on Grindr, looking happy as can be, and I can't have that. I hated him. So I was like, oh, why go for an older guy? I'll just get this one rich white dude. It'll be fine. It'll be easy. And so I, again, went to his home for adult reasons, and then when he was asleep, I took his watch, I took his wallet, and I went so far as to take his suit. I finally got the suit I always wanted, so I was very excited. But, unfortunately, about 2 days later, he found me on campus. And so here I am, fully ready to, get arrested, go to jail, be like every other member of my family who's rotting in prison right now. But instead, he was really weird, and he offered to buy me a cup of coffee, which I will take a free cup of coffee. We started talking, and he was so understanding and so kind and really kind of annoying about how polite he was with the whole thing. He told me he kind of got why I did it when I started to explain things. I told him that I hated him. I feel like he didn't earn anything he had. I feel like he was just being handed things, and I deserved those things. And I didn't know this dude. I knew his name, but past that, I had just made all these assumptions that he'd gotten somewhere I wanted to be easily, and that wasn't fair. I resented him for absolutely no reason, and I'd assumed he was somebody who deserved resentment, when actually he was a really nice guy who I robbed for no reason. I then started to slowly have to realize that all this resentment I'd been building up through the years was kind of for nothing. These people that I assumed that had it better than me, these people that I assumed had an easier life, they very well may have been in the same situation I had. It just looked different. The guy I robbed, he said that, he got the suit because he had been working since he was 16, and it was one of the few things that he'd earned himself. He was paying for college completely on his own. And here I was just assuming he'd been handed things. I didn't understand where he was coming from, and so I immediately cut off the relationship. Ironically, after robbing him, he continued to take me out for coffee, and about 2 years later, he proposed to me. And so here I am, 2 years later, engaged to somebody that I initially hated for no reason. I was so resentful that I almost completely cut off what has turned into the greatest relationship in my entire life. Somebody that I made assumptions about because I didn't like something about me, they ended up being so much better for me. We all have a reason to resent people, Maybe you're not thin, maybe you're not rich, maybe you don't have a great relationship with your parents. There's absolutely something, some reason that you don't like people. But at the end of the day, what you really don't like is something about you. You're never gonna quite change because you think that you deserve more than the other people around you. You not liking someone for being where you wanna be is not going to get you there. I spent so much time hating people for being rich, for being straight, for having parents. And at the end of the day, I was still poor and gay and had no parents. Me hating them didn't get me there. it didn't make a difference. All it did was make me really, really unhappy. And when I finally was willing to move past that, did any of those things go away? No, but I was now able to talk to more people. I was now able to make connections that I couldn't have before. Honestly, being engaged to Phil has really helped my financial situation, frankly. You know, when you take away the resentment in your life and you really just open yourself up to more people, you are so much better off. I like to make light of situations, but what I really hope you understand I'm saying is resentment will get you nowhere and it's only going to hurt you. Here I am 2 years later, finally getting rid of the resentment in my life. It took 20 years of work, but I'm finally starting to get over that resentment. And now I'm in a much better place in my life, and I'm engaged to a man I love so much, and rather than stealing a suit, we're buying suits together, and I couldn't be happier.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Right on. Oh my gosh. Oh, that was beautiful. I'm gonna come up there. I had a coffee before I came here, so I'm sorry. I didn't know I was
You're
gonna
so fine.
Be rough. Oh my God. Did you ever do theater?
No.
You never did theater?
I did show choir.
Show choir? Okay. Yeah, I mean, you have that sort of natural presence where, like, everything that you say, you believe it, and you're getting into it.
Thanks.
And I love that, and I'm sure it's a little bit easier when it's, like, a personal story that actually happened to you.
Yeah.
I loved, actually, that pretty much the entirety of your presentation is one big story. You
Yeah.
know? That makes it so easy to watch, man. It's even easier to watch because you're a bright person, you know, and you have a ton of energy to put out. Because you have so much energy to put out, one of the things that I was noticing, and I think you talked about it a little bit before, is that as you're moving, you kind of move in squares a little bit, you know, and you move around, and I get that. I do the same thing too, and I don't know if that's a nervous thing or something like that.
I think it is a bit, yeah.
A little bit. So that probably just comes with practice. So one of the things I had for you is, especially I was thinking with your opening story about being at the Men's Warehouse and.
I'm gonna take these notes out of my phone.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Like with your first story with being at the Men's Warehouse, you had a couple of different points. You had like points that you were making with those stories. And I know, this was something that I got told a lot in Com 210 that I never took, but it's a good note, is just moving when you have a point to make and then staying stationary.
Okay.
Make that point. And then finding other points that you can move again, and come to a stationary place. And I know this is kind of a small space to be doing that.
Yeah.
But just finding some places where you can make that definitive, like, this is a new point, and now on.
Okay.
Right? And then some other things I saw. What did I have? You're a very smiley person, which is awesome. Makes you very easy to watch. But you're also talking about some really serious points throughout this.
Yeah.
And I know you said you like to make light of some of those situations, and that's great. That's a lot of your personality. I think you could make the speech even more effective. Oh man. All right, I started the video again.
Cool.
Hey, Ashley Coker, I'm sorry, the video cut off, so we're kind of starting from another point here.
Yes. He's giving me notes, and I'm going to try to take those.
Yes, so the two notes that he's going to be working on for this one are trying to keep a serious face in some of the more serious places in the beginning of a speech, and then also only moving to a different spot when he has a different sort of point to make. So, all right, from the beginning of the speech, and I'll watch you do your thing, man.
So I'm talking today about how I spent my entire life trying to get a suit. It all started when I was about 14. I was a farmhand. I would spend basically days baling hay and clearing mud for about $50 a day for 8 hours of work. So I was definitely being swindled, but I didn't know it. But when I was about 14, I'd been saving money for a few months, and so I decided that I had enough money saved up and that I was going to buy a suit. I'd wanted a suit my whole life. I always thought it was like the bougiest thing you can have, and I wanted to be bougie. So my mom, who worked at Perkins, and I got into a car. I was in my work uniform, she was in hers, and we went all the way to a Men's Warehouse in Carmel. Bougiest place we could go in my mind. And at that point, we walked in, I'm covered in mud and hay, she's in a waitress uniform, and we walk in, and you can kind of tell we're immediately out of place. And the gentleman working there, he kind of thought the same thing. He came up to us and he told us, this might be out of your price range. And I explained that, I'd saved all this money, and he told me that maybe I should go to the Target down the street. I was a little offended, so I did what any reasonable 14-year-old would do, and I tried to punch the bitch. Tried as hard as I could. Didn't quite work. My mom grabbed me by the collar and dragged me out of the store. She dragged me in the parking lot of the Men's Warehouse, and she went off on me. I was furious. I'm shouting that I wanted to go in and fight the guy, but she told me that wasn't going to help anything, and that's not the people we were, and that at the end of the day, people like him would never understand people like us. And
Beautiful.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
That felt a lot better.
Yes. Did that feel better?
Yeah, it did.
Good.
Yeah.
It looked so much more natural, the way that you were moving when you said that having to go to the Target to do that. Beautiful. So when there were a couple of places, I had this written down earlier. There are a couple of places where you have some really funny lines and quips that you're having, and they kind of get muddled by your voice.
Okay.
You kind of throw them away a little bit. But those are really funny lines, and I think they show your personality well. So try, instead of ending, if you say, I was a farmhand and, blah, 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 and we got swindled. And instead of doing that, just keep your voice going. And we got swindled. The bit at the end where you talked about your mom saying, giving you that piece of advice, that was a beautiful place to be a little more serious, and that really translated.
Thank you.
I watched that and I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. So that was beautiful. Could we go back to the same place? And I'd like to see. When I'm doing presentations and things like that, I have a really hard time knowing what to do with my hands. Yeah. And you do a lot of hand gestures, and that's good. I think it's good if you don't want your natural position to be hands by your side, which can feel kind of weird. Yeah. Maybe find a neutral place up here.
No, I have to do it.
There you go. To keep your hands here and have some place to go back to that doesn't look feel.
Yeah, that's still not quite as flailing. Gotcha.
And you said you wanted to be a little more intentional with your gestures. I think that might help you if you can keep it here, keep it centered, and maybe think about slowing the gestures down a little bit.
Okay.
That might help you, instead of having a lot of different gestures for everything that you're saying, that might help you to make the gesture more pointed a little bit. So keep doing the moving on the different points. That was beautiful. Keep the same expression that you were using at that point. I thought that was great. But work on maybe keeping the hands a little more central.
Something that might help. I know I'm gonna have a clicker, so I'm gonna hold this as if it was my clicker. That way I can have my body right.
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. So try to slow this down a little bit, and let's go back there and give that a shot.
Sweet.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
So I'm gonna talk to you guys about how I spent my entire life trying to get a suit. It all started when I was about 14. I was a farmhand. I would basically bale hay and mud all day, and at the end of the day I'd get about $50 for 8 hours of work. So I was being swindled, but I didn't know it. When I was about 14, I decided after months of saving that I wanted to buy a suit. I thought that a suit was the bougiest thing you get, and I really wanted to be bougie. So I went and got my mom from Perkins. She worked there as a waitress, and I told her that I wanted a suit, and she was like, fine, we will go to Men's Warehouse. So we drove all the way to a Men's Warehouse in Carmel, which to me was like peak bougie. At that point in time, we walked in, I'm in my work uniform covered in mud and hay, she's in a waitress uniform, and it's very clear that we're out of place. But I figure, I have money, it's fine. So the gentleman who works there also noticed that we were out of place, and he comes up to us and he tells us that things might be a little out of our price range here. But I was like, no, I have money. And he said maybe that I needed to go to the Target down the street, which might be a little better for me. So I figure, I'm gonna do what every reasonable 14-year-old would do, and I tried to punch him, bitch, and tried as hard as I could, but did not work. My mom grabbed me by the shirt collar and dragged me out into the parking lot of a Men's Warehouse. It was going off on me, but I was furious. I started screaming about how I wanted to go back inside and I wanted to fight the guy, but my mom told me no, that we couldn't do that. That's not the kind of people we were, and that people like him would never understand people like us.
Good. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, that was beautiful. And I thought keeping the hand, you had that phone right here, and I thought that looked really good. It wasn't like crazy energy. It was a lot more controlled. And I thought that looked good. Did it feel good?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Right
I
on.
like that.
Could you try, if you don't mind, could you try going to the end of the story when your mom pulled you back into the parking lot, and try slowing down when you said that's not the kind of people we are.
Yeah.
Try giving some natural pauses in that part of the story to really like bring the weight home.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you just try that and slow it down and try to find some natural pauses there.
Cool. So I did what any reasonable 14-year-old would try to do, and I tried to punch them as hard as I could, but didn't work out because my mom drugged me out into the warehouse of the parking lot of a men's warehouse, and I was furious. I kept telling her I just wanted to go inside. I wanted to fight the guy. Like I wanted to feel better by causing him some pain, but my mom said no. That's not the kind of people we are. And then she said that people like him would never understand people like us.
Good. Yeah. I think you could even break it down just a little bit more. I think you could say, and my mom said, no, that's not the kind of people we were. And that people like him, you can take those pauses. You can really let that weight sink in, man.
Got it.
It might feel like a long time to you, but out here, we're just going to be sobbing like, oh my God, this is so good. So yeah, try making it even, try putting in some pauses that feel too long.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I'll let you know if they look weird. I bet they won't, but I'll let you know.
Cool.
Okay.
So I did what any reasonable 14-year-old tried to do, and I tried to punch the bitch, tried as hard as I could. But I couldn't because my mom grabbed me by the shirt collar and she dragged me out into the parking lot of a men's warehouse. I was furious. I wanted to go inside and fight the guy. But mom said, no, that's not the kind of people we are. And people like him, they're never going to understand people like us. That really stuck with me.
Yes! Yes! Holy shit, man. Yes, that was it. How did that feel?
That did feel a lot. It was dramatic. I liked it.
It was dramatic. And you have all this energy anyway. You're allowed to be a little dramatic. This is a dramatic story, man.
It is a dramatic story.
Yeah. So, and the way, I love that sort of shit when people take that time and let that sink in. I think that's really, instead of brushing over it, because that's not something that you should brush over.
Right.
That's your point. Don't resent that sort of stuff. So I love that. Would you mind doing that just one more time so I can see it again?
Yep.
Thank you.
Cool. So I did what any reasonable 14-year-old would do, and I tried to punch the bitch, tried as hard as I could, but my mom didn't let me. She grabbed me by the shirt collar and dragged me out into a parking lot of a men's warehouse. She would start going off on me, but I was furious, I wanted to go inside and fight the guy, but my mom said no. She said, that's not who we are. And people like him, they'll never understand people like us.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. That sort of contrast between the fun, lively Matthew and then the serious Matthew, that's what's gonna like pull everyone in and be like, oh, that's good.
Sick.
So I love that. I would like to go to, could you start with the story about robbing your fiance?
Yes, I can.
And could you try to implement some of what we've been, still figure out different points to move at, keep those hand gestures in towards you and a little slower. And with that, you could still slow down the hand gestures a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, finding places to be serious and to put those pauses in. And I'll watch it. Cool.
So I've been robbing older guys for a while, but then I found a young man on Grindr about my age who was in a really nice suit, and I was pissed. He looked so good. He had clearly all this money because he was in this great suit, and he had all these things that I wanted that I didn't have. And so I messaged him on Grindr, and again, we went back to his apartment for adult things. And when he was asleep, I took his watch, I took his wallet, and of course, I took the suit. And I think everything's good. We were good for about 2 days.
Could we stop for 1 second?
Yes.
I think you could I think that point about, and of course, I took the suit.
Okay.
I think that's a great place to pause, and you could even smile when you say it because it's kind of a mischievous thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a good exclamation point that
Yes.
you can put on and be like, and of course, I took the suit.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you mind trying that out for a second?
For sure.
Cool.
Start back at the same place.
Yeah.
So I've been robbing older guys on Grindr for a while, but then I found this younger guy about my age on Grindr in a suit, and I was pissed. He clearly had all this money because he has this nice suit. He has this thing that I've always wanted. He has all these things I've always wanted. And so I messaged him on Grindr, and we went back to his apartment for adult things. And when he fell asleep, I took his watch, I took his wallet, and of course, I took the suit.
Yes. Beautiful.
Cool.
Yes, I love that. Keep going if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I really like the way that feels.
Yeah.
I think that
It puts more of an emphasis on it, especially since this whole thing's kind of tied together by the suits.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
So I took the suit. And so I think I'm good for 2 days, everything's fine. Then he found me on campus, which was a little awkward. At this point I am full on ready to get arrested, go end up rotting in jail like the rest of my family. But instead, he asked me out for coffee. I think it was very weird. But hey, I won't turn down a free cup of coffee. So we go and we're talking, and I start to explain everything to him. He wanted me to give him his watch and wallet and suit back, which was disappointing. But I'm explaining to him, and he starts to understand, And what surprised me most is this person who I resented so much, just knowing nothing about him, he understood me. He started to say that he really got where I was coming from, and all these kind of preconceived notions I had about him, they were wrong all of a sudden. He wasn't this bougie guy. He had worked to buy his suit. It was one of the first things he ever bought himself. He was paying for college himself. He was doing all these things I assumed he hadn't been doing. I'm the only person doing. And all these preconceived notions I had that I pushed onto him, they were cutting me off from him.
Could you? Thank you. Good job. Could you go back to where you start talking about him understanding you, and make it even slower, molasses slow?
Gotcha.
Try taking a breath between each new part that you're introducing to the story.
Okay.
Okay. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead and give that a try.
And so, I won't turn down a free cup of coffee. So we go and we're talking, and I start to explain things, and he understands me. He wasn't mad. He wanted his watch, wallet, and suit back, which is disappointing. But he wasn't mad. He got me. He understood where I was coming from. All these kind of preconceived notions I had about him that I thought were true and reasons I resented him, they were wrong. He bought the suit himself. It was one of the first things he ever purchased himself. He was paying for college himself. He was working through all of it. And all these ideas that I had that made me angry and hate him, they were all wrong. None of it was true. I made it all up in my mind. And so I cut myself off from all these people, and I started to have to realize that all of the people my entire life that I resented, I could have been wronged about. I thought I was the only one working for these things, and so I resented people, but it wasn't true. I forgot where my presentation goes.
No, that was good.
Yeah.
That was good. Did you feel that weight and?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes, that looked beautiful. I think that's going to translate super, super well. I think that people are going to be locked into that. Now, the next step for that is to. I know it's tough when you get a little more serious to keep the energy the same, but to just make it a different sort of energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So instead of having it be a big bubbly energy, Matthew, because there were a couple of lines that you were saying that were so low down here.
Gotcha.
That some people might miss them. And you don't want, this is such a good story that no one wants to miss any part of it.
Yeah.
So if there's a way to play with some ways to keep your voice at about the same volume, to keep the story up, but to bring the mood into a different place, to bring it down a little bit.
Yeah, I can do that.
You know, you can do that with your face. You can do that with your, you know, with your expression. You can get a little more serious and stiff, but keep your voice at about the same volume. Okay, does that make sense? Right on. Yeah, go back to the start of that little section.
Okay. So he asked me out for a cup of coffee, and I'm not going to turn down a free cup of coffee. So we go, and I start to kind of explain myself. And I'm surprised because he's not angry. He understands me. I mean, he wants watch, keys, and wallet back, but suit bag.
So so that's a place where you can make that a point instead of sort of a throwaway.
Gotcha.
You know, instead of, I mean, he wanted the watch and the suit and things like that. You know, you could say, you know, I mean, he wanted the watch and the suit and the wallet back, but still, you know, you can keep it up while keeping that same tone.
Gotcha.
You know, so go ahead and give that a try.
Yeah. So I mean, he wanted the watch and the suit and the wallet back, which was disappointing. But he understood me. He wasn't angry, and he said that he understood where I was coming from and where all this kind of anger was coming from. This person that I had assumed all of these things about, I was wrong. You know, he bought the suit himself. He was working through college. He paid for all these things on his own, and I had projected these ideas onto him. And it made me realize that all of these people that I spent my entire life angry and resenting, I could have been wrong, you know? If he was okay, then who's to say all these people weren't? We all have people that we resent. There's all...
All right, my phone ran out of storage again, so we're restarting this. So what I noticed when you were running through that last part was that you sort of flowed that last section about your fiance into we all have people that we resent without really taking a break there. And that's a perfect example of a place where you could shift your position and you could make that pause even a little bit longer and establish this is different. You could take a pause before we all have people that we resent, and you can take a pause after we all have people that we resent.
That sounds good.
That's a good place to be making eye contact with people and to be like, this is something that applies to each. Listen up, because this is something that applies to everyone.
Gotcha.
You know, this is it.
Cool.
So yeah, if you wouldn't mind going back to the end of that, the end part of that story right before you get to that section, and then go into it. Cool.
He made me realize that all these people I spent my entire life angry at, it might not have been their fault. We all resent somebody. You know, maybe you don't like someone because they're thinner than you. Maybe you don't like somebody because they have more money than you. Maybe you don't like somebody because they live in a better place than you. But we all have some reason that we don't like people. And that's not getting us anywhere. Resentment, all it does is it cuts you off from the people around you. You know, I spent my entire life resenting people, and I spent all that time in isolation. I met that guy and I robbed him. I almost ruined what turned it out to be the greatest relationship of my entire life, because 2 years later I was engaged to that guy. If you spend your entire life resenting people, you're not going to get anywhere. Just because you hate somebody because they're thin doesn't make you lose any weight, you know. I hated people for being straight, for having a good relationship with their parents, and for having money. I was still gay, poor, and had a terrible relationship with my parents. It didn't make a difference.
Good job. Good. Yeah, that was awesome. That has so much weight behind it, man. I mean, this is you laid the groundwork really, really, really well for an impactful presentation, and I'm loving it.
Cool.
So after you go home from this, you might want to sit down with. Did you type this out at all? Do you have like a transcript, or was it all?
I have note cards.
Note cards. Okay. You might want to go through some of those note cards and figure out for yourself where are some good places that you know you can take that pause and make it. A couple of ones that I just noted were, "That's not getting us anywhere," or something that you said. That's a really impactful line.
Okay.
Because that sort of goes along with the we all have people that we resent, or
right.
something like that. And then that's not getting us anywhere is sort of like the second add-on part to what you said before. That's your point, is that that's not getting us anywhere.
Gotcha.
That's a really impactful place. And then you said if you spend your entire life resenting blah, blah, blah,
Blah, blah, yeah.
that's another good place to make it a stick. This entire last part is just like,
Let's cut it up.
drive it home, man. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. Get into people's hearts and make them cry. You know. So if you wouldn't mind going back to the we all have people that we resent,
Okay.
and go forward from that. You know, don't be afraid to. All right, we're using Matthew's phone now. So yeah, go back to that section about we all have people that we resent. And what I was saying was it's okay while you're presenting to take a pause, take a break from what you're saying, and to think, is this a good place to do this? Is this a good place to make, because you're just practicing right now. So it's okay if you take that little split second to think, what's the best way to deliver this next line so that it's impactful?
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Sweet. All right. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and start that.
We all have people that we resent. Maybe you hate somebody for being thinner than you. Maybe you hate somebody for having more money than you. Maybe you hate somebody for having a better relationship with their parents than you do. There is something in all of us that makes us resent people. But that's not going to get us anywhere. Just because you're angry at somebody for having something you don't, doesn't mean you have that thing now. I hate people for being straight, for being rich, for having a better relationship with their parents. But you know what? I was still gay, I was still poor, and I still had a terrible relationship with my parents. I didn't get anywhere. When you spend all this time resenting people and focusing on it, all you do is cut yourself off from people around you. You don't make any progress.
Good. So in that entire part, I don't know that you moved from the place that you were in.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were a couple of places that you could probably put some movement in there.
Okay.
Even if it's just one, so that you're not stagnant delivering that
Gotcha.
That piece. So if you wouldn't mind going back to the same place
Yep.
and doing it, it looked good. It looked really good.
Cool.
So, yeah, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and try that.
We all resent somebody for something. Maybe you resent somebody for being thinner than you. Maybe you resent somebody for having more money than you. Maybe you resent somebody for having a better relationship with their parents than you do. But that doesn't get us anywhere. I've resented people for being straight, for having money, for having a good relationship with their parents. And you know what? I was still gay and poor and had a terrible relationship with my parents. I didn't get anywhere. When you have all this anger and resentment, you don't move forward at all. All you do is cut yourself off from the people around you.
That was beautiful.
Cool.
Beautiful.
Sick.
Beautiful, yes. I thought each of those was intentional. I thought the speed that you were delivering those lines was perfect. I think your hand gestures are actually, I think keeping them inside is working beautifully for you.
Cool.
Do you feel that too?
Yes.
Great, man. Yeah. It's
Sick.
really coming together. How much more of that end of the speech do you have?
Like how much do I have left?
Yeah.
Pretty much just kind of like the end bit where I talk about where Phil and I moved on to and kind of like how getting over resentment will help you.
Great. Could you go from that same spot that we were just at and run it all the way through to the end? I'm
Yeah.
not going to stop you when you're running it through, but I'm going to take some notes about
Sick.
things you're doing wrong. Cool.
Cool. I spent my entire life angry. I spent my entire life just hating people for things that I thought was somehow making them better than me. But all I did was end up isolated. When I finally met somebody who made me really, really look at what I was doing and really think about why I resented these people, I realized that I was wrong. And when I finally got over that barrier and I stopped resenting people, it became the best thing in my life. ended up engaged to a man who I tried to rob. I wanted to take a suit from him because I resented him for having money, and when I finally moved past that, here we are 2 years later, buying suits together. If you get rid of resentment, it's fuck. I just realized I cut out the line about I don't like to take things seriously, which she said you should have. So.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah.
You can go back to whatever spot you want.
I'm gonna roll it back.
Sweet.
Yep.
Oh, well, I guess since we're stopped anyway, the bit that you said about when I stopped resenting people, it was the best thing that had happened in my life. That's a great point to let that smile go.
Cool.
Best thing that happened in my life. That's an obvious shift in emotion from, I used to be angry. I used to resent people, and when I stopped resenting people, boom.
Boom. Gotcha.
Best thing that happened in my life. I think that would be a good little accent to put on there. So whenever you're ready.
Yeah. I spent my entire life angry and hating people because they had things that I didn't like about myself. And I met this guy who I tried to rob. And when I finally talked to him and got over that resentment and moved past all that anger, that was the best thing in my life. I don't like to take things too seriously. I try to keep it light, but I really hope you guys do hear me when I say that resentment, all it's going to do is cut you off from the people around you. When I finally moved past all of that, I got to be with this person who's turned into the best relationship in my life. That resentment was gone, and now this person who I tried to rob and take their suit, we were buying suits together for a wedding. If you can move past resentment, you are just going to open yourself up to such a better life and so many more relationships.
Yes. Great. Beautiful.
Sick.
A gesture that I thought had a lot of weight with it that was very intentional was when you said something about cut you off, and you made a box with your hands. I don't know if you thought about doing that.
Yeah.
Beautiful, man. Keep it. Doing stuff like that, thinking about different places that you can make a simple little gesture like that, because it looked really natural. It didn't look like you had planned it out. It looked like something that just came to you.
Cool.
So finding places to do little gestures like that, I think, is going to take you where you need to go for having intentional hand gestures and stuff like that. Beautiful, beautiful, man. I love it. I kind of want to watch you run it from the beginning.
Okay.
And keep the things that we've talked about in mind. There are still places where you could slow down and take pauses. Take more than you feel like you need to, you've got time. And, well, actually, I don't know. Maybe the first time you ran it, you might have been a little over 10 minutes. But, you can find ways to get around that. So, yeah, if you wouldn't mind going back to the beginning. You're doing a great job, man. It's
For sure.
a ton of fun to watch.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to talk to you guys about how I spent my entire life trying to get a suit. When I was about 14, I was working as a farmhand.
Hold on. Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. So in that beginning part, I think it would make it stick just a little bit more if you really emphasize, I spent my entire life trying to get a suit.
Gotcha.
Because that phrasing is so absurd. I spent my life trying to get a suit. Right. That's something that you can that makes it stick in the beginning. That'll make people be like, what? Suit, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead and give that a try.
So I'm going to talk to you guys about how I spent my entire life trying to get a suit.
Nice. Keep going.
When I was about 14, I was working as a farmhand. I basically baled hay and shoveled mud for about 8 hours a day for $50. I was definitely getting swindled, but it's fine. After a few months of saving up money, I decided that I was going to buy a suit. I wanted it because I thought a suit is the bougiest thing you could have. And so I went and I got my mom. She was at Perkins where she worked as a waitress, and I told her that I wanted to buy a suit, and she was like, all right, sure. And so we drove to a men's warehouse in Carmel, which I thought was the bougiest place you could be. Still kind of is. At that point, we walked into the men's warehouse. I was covered in hay and mud in my uniform, and my mother was in her waitress uniform. And we were clearly out of place. You know, or the gentleman working there also kind of noticed we were out of place. He came up to us and he told us that things there might be a little bit out of our price range. And I said, no, it's okay, I have money. But he said that we might want to go to the Target down the street. So I did what any reasonable 14-year-old would do. I tried to punch the bitch as hard as I could. But didn't happen. My mom grabbed me by the shirt collar and dragged me out into the parking lot. I was furious. I was shouting about how I wanted to go in and fight the guy. But Mom said, no. That's not the kind of people we are. And that people like him would never understand people like us. And nothing has ever stuck with me that deeply. At that point, I ran with that idea. I started to resent everyone around me. Everyone at school who had even a little bit of money, I hated them. You know, I was really poor. My clothes were covered in holes. They were all secondhand or stolen. And so anyone around me who had something even slightly nice, I resented them because they had something I didn't. I lived in a trailer, and so all the people who had houses, I resented them. I took it a step further. When I started to realize I was gay, at that point in time, I decided to hate every straight person, which big portion there. From there, I just spent my entire life isolating myself from the people around me because I hated them so much. And I wasn't mad about it. It was good for me. I felt independent. You know, I didn't need anyone. I had all this anger inside that made me feel like I was just stronger alone. But as I got older, that independence started to feel more like isolation. But you know, I thought maybe when I got to college it would be different. And so I came here to Ball State and things didn't change. In fact, it got worse. When I started to meet people here, I saw people who were on scholarships. I saw people whose parents were paying for school. People who didn't have to work a job while they were in college because they were being taken care of. And I hated them. So much so that I decided to start robbing people, as you do. I got on an app called Grindr. It was a gay dating app, and I would meet older gentlemen, and I would go to their houses, and we would do adult things. And from there, I'd wait for them to fall asleep, and then I would take their watches, their wallets, whatever cash they had lying around the house, anything. And I was pretty good at it. I never got caught, you know. I gave them a fake name. I always picked older guys, so they were never just around campus. I was doing well. It was some Ocean's 11 shit, let me tell you. But then, one day while I was on Grindr, I saw a younger guy, about my age, and I was pissed. He had on the nicest suit, and I was furious. I immediately started assuming all those things I'd always been assuming, that he had money, you know, he was better off than me, and that I deserved the things he had. And so, I messaged him, you know, we met up, we went back to his place to do adult things, and from there I waited for him to fall asleep. And when he did, I took his watch, I took his wallet, and of course, I got the suit. But I thought I was good, you know, disappeared, but about 2 days later, he found me on campus, which was just a little awkward. So, you know, I'm full on ready to be arrested, thrown in jail, rot away in prison like the rest of my family. But instead, he asked me out for coffee. And, you know, I'm not gonna say no, I won't turn down a free cup of coffee. But what confused me is when I thought he would be angry at me, he understood me. All this kind of hatred that I built up and anger that I assumed he didn't have for me, he said he got where I was coming from. And then I was forced to see that all of this resentment that I had felt towards people my whole life, it was misplaced. You know, all the things I thought were wrong with people, I might have been wrong about. We all resent somebody for something. You might hate somebody because they're thin,
Or you might hate someone because they have more money than you, or because they have a better relationship with their parents. But that won't get you anywhere. I spent my entire life angry because people were straight, because they were rich, because they had a good relationship with their parents. And you know what? I was still gay, I was still poor, and I still had a terrible relationship with my parents. I didn't get anywhere. When we resent people, all we do is cut ourselves off from the people around us. We don't get anywhere. Just because you are angry at somebody for having the thing you want does not mean you will get that thing. I was forced to stop resenting people. I met this man who I've robbed, who I thought should be this terrible person. And he was fantastic. And when I finally got over that anger, I opened myself up to the best relationship that I'd ever had, because I would, 2 years later, end up engaged to that guy. This person that I hated initially turned into the love of my life, and someone who I initially went to steal a suit from. Just 2 years later, we would be shopping for suits together for a wedding. When you finally let go of that resentment, and I don't like to take things too seriously, but I really want you guys to hear this. When you let go of that resentment, you open yourself up to such a better life. You will be so much happier because you can form relationships with people. Resentment, it just isolates you. If you can stop resenting people, you will not only have such better relationships, but just such a happier life. Cool.
Nice.
That does
Holy
feel a lot
shit.
better than the first run.
Yeah, I believe it, man. I mean, I'll probably send you the video I have of your first run, because it just looks, I mean, so much more professional. It just looks
Thanks.
super well. It's put together, man. You're a good presenter anyway, you know, but the way that you've been working on these things is like, it's taking it to that next level, man, for real.
Thank you.
So the one like note that I had was the first time that you say, and 2 years later we ended up engaged. You could make that part even bigger, because I'm gonna guess that's probably gonna get a laugh.
Okay.
I was surprised when I found out that the dude
That's
you were
fair.
talking about
Yeah.
is actually your fiance, because most people in here know that you're engaged.
Yeah.
But not everyone in here knows. I didn't
I
know.
tried to rob him, yeah.
Right. So finding a way to emphasize that point a little bit more. Good job explaining Grindr for the people who in this class might not know what Grindr is.
Right.
That's good. Great emphasis of, and of course, I took the suit. You know, that made me fucking cackle, man. That was good. And then you had a beautiful pause right before you said something about he got where I was coming from when you were talking about getting coffee with him. You had just this beautiful second right before you started explaining that, where it was like, oh man, oh, that's so good. And I think we're probably getting pretty close on time here.
Yeah, right about.
So, you know, I don't have much else to say for you. I think you wanted to work on more intentional gestures.
Yeah.
And a lot of those were really good, man. Really, really good.
Cool.
They look thought out, and you were taking all those notes super well. Moving intentionally across the aisle does wonders, man. Taking those pauses makes it sound more cleaned up and very, very intentional. And so I think if you keep doing that stuff and you go back in your note cards and you make little notes about where you want to do that,
Sick.
it's going to be, you know, one of, if not the best presentations in this class. I guarantee it.
Thank you.
People are going to watch it and be like, "What the fuck, man? He used to rob people, and now he's engaged." It's so cool. So good job.
Awesome.
Good job. I got nothing else for you, man. Nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
You
man.
take your phone back. Thank you, man.
Thank you. I will give this to you on box.